Welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Blair Symes and I am the Director of Content Marketing here at DialogTech. And today we're going to be talking about paid search and mobile click-to-call, new strategies to drive calls and sales. So a little housekeeping before we begin. This webinar will be recorded, so if you want to watch it afterwards, if you missed something, or if you want to share it with a colleague, I should be sending you an email afterwards to confirm and give you a link to the recording. Also, if you have any questions during the webcast, please use the chat box to your left, and I will try to answer as many of those questions as I can at the end of the presentation. So here's a quick look at the agenda of what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to start with talking about some of the statistics, the latest statistics on mobile, paid search, and click-to-call, and I'm actually going to be peppering in stats throughout the presentation. I'm going to talk about, obviously some of the ways to use paid search to drive phone calls and revenue, and then some of the technologies you can use not only to attribute calls to optimize performance, but also to personalize and control the in-call experience to convert more of these callers that you're paying money to drive to actual customers or appointments or opportunities. And I'll try to pepper in some stories from DialogTech customers for each of these technologies as we go. So if you're not familiar with DialogTech, we are the leading provider of call analytics, attribution, and automation for marketers and for marketing agencies. So we've got a full suite of tools, as you can see on the right. And a popular solution we have is our DialogTech for Mobile Marketing solution, which gives you keyword-level call analytics and automation for all of your mobile marketing. And I'll be talking about some of those technologies throughout the presentation as we go. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to cover today. So let's talk about why mobile is so critical to paid search. Here's some latest statistics from Pew Research that shows smartphone adoption in the US specifically. You can see on the left that 64% of US adults today now own smartphones. That's quite a large number, and that number is only increasing with each year. You can see some of the breakdown demographically from males to females. The 18 to 29 and 30 to 49 demographic I find particularly interesting. We're talking about over 80% of adults in the US from 18 to 50 own smartphones. You're starting to get a sense now of why mobile has become so important. And that last stat, perhaps on the right, you can see, the more affluent the adults, the more likely they are to have a smartphone. So smartphones, pretty much everyone has one today. But it's not just adoption, it's also how they're being used. You can see some statistics here now that people spend more time on their mobile devices and smartphones than they do watching television. And in terms of search, mobile search has surpassed desktop search. I don't know if you've seen this announcement a couple months ago from Google, who did acknowledge that now there are more searches taking place on mobile devices like smartphones than there are on desktops. And you can see some of the breakout to the right of when we're talking about smartphone searches, where those searches are appearing. So over a third are happening in the Google search app. You can see some of the browsers that are playing a part in smartphone search. And that last number, voice search, is something I'll cover in a little bit of detail in the middle of the presentation. But I think it's important that now we're seeing the rise in people using voice to search, and they're not using the keypad. So of course, now that search volumes have gone mobile and are increasingly going mobile, you can see how advertisers are reacting. Here's some of the breakdowns of paid search spend in the United States. You can see last year the desktop in the red was still a little bit ahead of mobile, but they predict that by the end of this year, mobile will have surpassed desktop in terms of paid search ad spending. And then you can keep seeing how those gaps are only going to widen. Paid search spend is actually going to be going down as mobile rises, and also total paid search volume for all devices is on the rise. So that also brings up the fact that paid search is becoming ever more competitive as more and more people are bidding more and more of their budget on paid search. So you need to have techniques to constantly optimize your paid search campaigns. And I'm going to cover a few of those today in relation to click-to-call. So here's something that Google is promoting a lot recently, and that's the idea that smartphone searches are micro moments, that people are going onto their smartphones and searching in different ways than they do desktop. In the table below, you can see some of the differences. Usually mobile are in-the-moment short searches, and there's an immediacy to those searches. They want information right away. So when you're running paid search campaigns for mobile, you need to be aware of this. You need to be aware that people are looking for information right away. I do like the stat in the green to the right that shows that 29% increase in mobile conversion rates in the past year. So it's not just mobile spending and volumes that are up. Conversions, of course, are going up. And as advertisers, either for our own company or in a marketing agency for clients, we need to be aware of this and really take advantage of what's happening on smartphones and mobile for paid search. So, of course, mobile search drives phone calls. So obviously that's because of click-to-call and the ease of use of tapping a click-to-call button on a smartphone as opposed to having to fill out a lead form with your thumbs on a small screen. We talked about how mobile search is all about immediacy. People want immediate information. They're not willing, for the most part, to spend the time filling out a form or waiting for a salesperson to contact them back. They want to reach out and engage with a company and get information right away. And the phone call is, thanks to click-to-call, is really the easiest way for them to do this. And here are some statistics that back up this idea. This is from research from VI Kelsey. Last year we saw in the US that mobile search drove 38 billion phone calls. That's billion phone calls with a B. And by 2018, that number is going to almost double to 73 billion. So mobile search is driving a tremendous amount of call volume, more and more as each month. So people who are running mobile searches want to call you. And there's some statistics here. This is from Google that shows that the higher the purchase price of an item, the more likely it is someone wants to call, which makes sense. If it's a low-cost item, perhaps they can just buy it online. They're not as interested. But if it's the more expensive the purchase, the more likely it is they want to actually talk to a human being and get some answers to questions before they go ahead and make a purchase. So calls are the easiest way to do that. And people are actually calling throughout the customer journey. So depending on what type of business you're running and what type of marketing you're doing, you should be aware that people find it extremely or very important to be able to call you throughout each phase. It's not just the purchase phase highlighted here where they want to be able to call you, but they want to be able to call while they're at the inspiration phase or the research phase. So businesses that are trying to nurture leads and doing content marketing and using paid search to drive those types leads for those types of initiatives should be aware that people do want to call you during this process, and you should make it easy for them to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So calls are skyrocketing from mobile search and from paid search, and that's tremendous news for marketers. You can see some stats here that show that 66% of sales managers rate phone leads as either good or excellent. That's better than any other type of lead. It makes sense. People who call you are more engaged and really ready to talk to a salesperson. They're the type of leads that marketers want to drive. And mobile search and paid search and click-to-call make it easier for us to do that, which is fantastic. And these calls convert 10 times more than web clicks. So you can see that web form leads generally convert at around 2% or so, depending on what type of campaign or industry you run. But calls to your business convert 10 times more than that. They have the exact type of lead you should be spending money on to drive. So let's talk about how to do that. So how to drive more calls from your paid search ads. Well, the first way, of course, is to create mobile preferred ads. Whether on Bing or on AdWords or whichever search engine you're using, you should create ads specifically for mobile devices, for smartphones. And you can do that simply by checking a box, as you can see an example here from AdWords. Just check that mobile box, and that means that these ads will be showing on mobile devices. And when you know your ads are going to be showing on smartphones and mobile devices, you should tailor those ads specifically to that experience. Your ad text should acknowledge the fact that people are going to be viewing these ads on smartphones, mobile devices. So language such as visit our mobile site or operator standing by, call now. This type of language speaks directly to the experience this person is having with your mobile paid search ad. If you're driving people to a landing page, be sure that landing page, of course, is mobile optimized. That's a no-brainer, but some people still aren't doing this. I still see examples where people are driving from a paid search ad on a smartphone to a non-mobile optimized ad, and that's just not the right experience. You should not be spending money to do that. We'll talk a little bit more about ways to optimize your landing pages in a bit. Now, if you're going to be using site links, which we'll talk about later, make sure those site links, for example, are also to the right mobile optimized pages. You need to control the entire experience for mobile, and that includes also analyzing mobile ad performance separately from your desktop ads. And when you click the mobile preferred link, you can do that. So you want to see what language is working for mobile devices. You want to see what's the performance like for your mobile preferred ads, so you can optimize in different ways than you would your desktop ads. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So first and foremost, when you're talking about mobile ads, be sure to take advantage of call extensions. You should all be familiar with call extensions at this point, but if you're not, you can see examples on the left from AdWords, on the right from Bing. It's the call button, the call icon, the clickable call number that shows up within the text of your paid search ads. And when someone clicks that button, it triggers an immediate call to your business. Google put out some statistics a little while back that showed that 70% of searchers have used call extensions to call a business. And even if they don't use call extensions, if you have a call extension within your ad, it does show that people are 8% more likely to click on your ad and visit your landing page if you have that call extension enabled. So be sure to take advantage of that. It's a no-brainer for your smartphone ads, for your mobile preferred ads to use call extensions. Here's some statistics that Google put out around types of industries that are that want to be able to call people directly from a smartphone ad. These stats are a little bit old. They haven't updated these in a bit, but you can see types of industries where people don't need to visit your mobile landing page, if they're ready to call you directly from a search. And call extensions are one way to do that. And here's the negative side. The flip side of that coin is that if you don't have call extensions in your ads, there are people that are actually turned off by that are more likely to explore other brands. So if you're showing up in a search with a competitor, your paid search ad does not have a call extension and theirs does, you may be driving people to your competitor's search ad, even if your ad is showing ahead of theirs in the rankings. So, at the end of the day, if you're going to be doing mobile preferred ads, you should be using a call extension. And DialogTech has the most accurate keyword level call attribution for Google call extensions. So if you're going to be using call extensions in your mobile ads, you need to be able to track those ads, the performance of those ads, down to the keyword level. So understand which keywords and which ads are driving calls directly from Google call extensions so that you can optimize performance for the keywords and the ads that are actually driving real results and eliminate the spend on the ones that aren't. And DialogTech has keyword level call attribution technology that is the most accurate in the industry, specifically for Google call extensions. And what's also great about our solution is it's really easy to set up. If you're managing a ton of ad groups, a ton of campaigns, either for your company or perhaps if you're an agency and you've got a bunch of different clients, it can be a real pain to set up call tracking within Google call extensions. But we have a process within our tool that automates that. So you can really take the headache and the pain out of getting set up to track the keyword level performance for your Google call extension. So once you do that, here's a new format that Google released recently called call-only ads. So obviously this is only for mobile, and you can see how you enable it at the top. But a call-only ad, an example on the bottom left, is an ad format that only triggers a call. The only possible conversion on this ad is a phone call. And you can see the header of the ad has the phone number that the person will be calling, and it has the usual URL and the body copy, but the only possible conversion is a phone call. So what's great about these ads is, you can, once you know what a phone call is worth to your business, if you can figure out what a phone call is worth, you can actually use that data to determine how much to bid for Google call-only ads, because the only possible outcome is a phone call. You should also bid on keywords that generate calls. So if you've done some research and shown that certain keywords are more likely to generate visits to your site, research, these are people in the not quite ready to convert, don't use those keywords in your call-only ads. Only use keywords that you think will generate a phone call. And you can use language within your ads to incentivize a phone call, such as operators are standing by, call now. You can offer a discount, for example. Call now and get 50% off your purchase. Whatever it is, whatever makes sense. You should test different incentives, because people are going to be calling you directly from the Google search results. They're going to be foregoing any visit to your landing page, so you need to incentivize them to call. A last point about call-only ads is that not every click is a conversion. So on average, you'll see that maybe your call-only ads got 100 clicks last month, but those doesn't mean you got 100 phone calls to your business. Someone still has to accept on the right that call. So when they click on the ad, it prompts the person to call you, and it's a click, but it's not a conversion. So you should be able to you should use DialogTech trackable phone numbers in there to measure the actual results, to measure actual conversions, call conversions from your call only. So let's talk about mobile local search volumes. Local search is an enormous factor in mobile. So you can see some statistics here around local search in the US, mobile versus desktop. And you can see last year it was neck and neck, a little bit more on the mobile side for local search, but this gap is starting to widen. Desktop local search volumes are expected to slightly decrease, while mobile local search volumes are skyrocketing. You can see almost 82 billion phone calls from local search, from mobile devices with local search specifically this year. That's a 23% growth from last year. And that number is supposed to more than double from 2014 to 2019. So really some amazing statistics that just came out from BI Kelsey showing the growth in local call volumes for mobile. Now here's some stats from last year that show the value of these calls to an advertiser. People who are running local searches on mobile devices have high purchasing intent. They want to, 65% of them actually want to complete a purchase that day. And 64% of those purchases are actually taking place offline. A lot of those are store visits, but a lot of them also involve a phone call. So an offline conversion, a phone call. Up to 53% of mobile shoppers from this study called a business from local search. And as you're optimizing your campaigns for local search, for mobile, you should use local phone numbers. They're preferred 3-to-1 over toll-free numbers, and we'll show you a little bit about that here on the next slide. So here's an example of a local search I ran the other day for a plumber in Columbus. 40 to 50% of all mobile searches have local intent. So local search is not just that most local searches are happening on mobile devices, but that a high percentage of mobile searches are actually local searches. So you can see some ways you might want to optimize your paid search campaigns, take advantage of this tremendous amount of traffic. We always talked about the local phone numbers. Make sure if you're using a local phone number in your ads. You can use DialogTech has trackable local phone numbers as well as trackable toll-free numbers. You can take advantage of this to get full keyword level attribution in your ad. But so use call extensions, of course, with a local phone number. You can see number 1 there. And you can see how now whenever you use a call extension in Google, Google automatically populates that call to action, the call with the phone number to the left. Use call-centric ad language. So there's a couple examples in the text, in the second text. Actually, the first one has call now as well, but the second one has call your local plumbing expert. We answer calls 24/7. I love that particular language, showing that you can call whenever, and we'll be ready to take your call. We are there to take your call. Include incentives to call, number 4. So you can see some examples from both. The first one has 40% off your service. The second one has, $50 off plumbing repair. So give incentive for people to call, to drive that call conversion. And of course, mention the location in your ad text and your URL. You can see some examples from the top of, how they have Columbus within their ad text and their URL. It's a great way to show that this is someone who is within their area, specific to them. So Google recognized this trend of local search recently this year with some statistics that showed that there's been a 100% increase in near me searches in the last year. People using searches that include the terms near me or nearby. There's been a huge jump in those numbers. And 80% of those are happening on mobile devices. So in order for you as an advertiser to take advantage of that, AdWords put out a new format called Near Me Business Mobile Ads. So you can see an example here. And what this is it forgoes the usual ad text that you're used to and instead lists businesses near the searcher, including a location extension and a call extension. And it shows how close these people are to them and where they're located. So it's a great way if you have a local business to drive calls and store visits using nearby business ads. Enable location extensions for local stores. So we just showed you the nearby business format. Here's a variation on that where instead of showing multiple businesses, instead they list multiple store locations or dealer locations within a single ad. So here's an example for Yamaha where I ran a search for Yamaha motorcycles, and I'm in Chicago, and this is what they came back with. They've got their full ad text, plus they're listing calls to the local dealers, the local Yamaha dealers that were closest to me where I ran that search. And the call button, of course, shows up as well. If you want to run these are things that can occur. These location extensions can occur automatically once you set up your business within Google My Business. So once you set that up, it can automatically pull in this information. You can also control which location extensions to use, where these ads show up, if you want them to show up on desktop or on mobile. So you do have some control over which ones show up. So I would certainly recommend if you're a multi-location business, if you've got multiple storefronts or dealerships or whatever it is within a region, to test location extensions and use those call buttons to drive calls to your local stores. So other popular AdWords mobile extensions. So a couple of these, the first and the fifth are actually automated. So these are ones that AdWords will automatically populate into your ad text if they apply. So the seller rating, for example, the seller rating will show up if you've got a seller review from a reputable third-party source. Google can automatically pull that review and show it right underneath your URL. Call-out extensions, number 2. I like these. These are the ones where you control, these aren't clickable links, but they're language, up to 3 possible call-out extensions where you can add extra language, extra incentives to your ads. You can see there's one on the left and one on the bottom right that are both doing that. These are the texts that are separated by a bullet. And you can decide what you want to have here, but it's a great way to differentiate yourself from your competitors. It's a great way to have extra offers or extra incentives to drive visits and calls from your ad. Site links, you'll see these everywhere. Every one of these ads has site links showing up. These are pages that you can decide, up to 4 which pages on your site you also want to list within your ad. If you don't list site links in your ad, sometimes you'll get Google will pull in examples dynamically for you. So I certainly suggest going ahead and picking these site links. What I love about the Yamaha ad is that the more you have of these, you can really dominate the smartphone screen with your ads and really crop out all of your competitors if you take advantage strategically of some of these AdWords extensions that are available. Number 4, you can see an example at the top. That's a review. So again, great. If you've got some great reviews, you can submit those reviews in AdWords, and Google will review that and see if it makes sense to show up on in your ads. If you're going to include reviews in your ads, Google does have a couple policies you want to be mindful of. So do a search and definitely search for Google policies for review extensions and see which ones they want. But best practices would be don't repeat text in your ads in your reviews. So the review text should be different from the text in your ads. Make sure you're using a reputable source that Google can verify. There are a bunch of different criteria for what will be an acceptable review. So make sure you look at those before you submit one. And the last one, dynamic structured snippet, is an automated one that pulls in. You can see the example here, number 5, that last line, insurance coverage. This is an example that Google will automatically pull in based on some of the information it finds on your landing page. So it's just a different way to get more information to differentiate your ad from the other ads within that search. So it'll pull in information about brands or subcategories. Here, for example, it shows that this insurance has coverage for home, auto, and motorcycles. This is all automated stuff that Google will pull in, but you need to be aware of how these are impacting how your ads are being perceived on smartphones and mobile devices. So I promised a little bit on voice search, and here it is. Voice search, a year ago when I was doing a presentation similar to this, I just said, the jury's still out on voice search, whether or not it's going to have an impact on a real impact on conversions and business. Now, some statistics have come in that show that, we saw that 7% of smartphone searches now are voice search. A lot of people are just looking for basic information when they do these searches. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're driving real conversions to business. But there are a lot of people that also think that voice search is the future of search. That this is how people are going to be running searches, in years to come. As we see cars, for example, become mobile enabled, where people can run voice searches in their cars. There are definitely things that are showing why wearable technologies as well. Examples where, a watch where you don't have an actual keypad, any search is a voice search. You can see how these are starting to pick up steam. So I'm not going to dismiss voice search at this moment, but you should do a little research and see, is voice search something that makes sense for you to bid on for your paid search ad? If you do, some tips would be, analyze your long-tail keywords to find patterns. You may want to use modified broad match keywords, for example, so that you can dictate which words must appear or close variants of those words must appear for your ad to be shown. But this way, if someone has a 27-word to voice search to Google now, you don't have to obviously bid on those 27 words. Instead, you can bid on some of the key ones, and you'll still show up using modified broad match. And you should also negative out the ones that don't make sense to you. So as you're doing research on which bids are driving people to see your ad, you may want to start saying, well, let's negative out these words from these ads because it's not the right searches that I want to spend money. So that, in a nutshell, is voice. If you have any more questions on voice, I can answer some of those at the end of the presentation. So how do you optimize mobile web pages to drive calls? I think it's a no-brainer at this point that you should have mobile optimized landing pages. Now, whether that means you have a dedicated mobile site or a mobile responsive site, the jury, a year ago, 2 years ago, people were really more in the dedicated mobile site camp, but I'm seeing a lot of shift towards the responsive site. It really just depends on what makes sense for your business. But when you're running paid search campaigns that drive people to a mobile optimized landing page, it goes without saying now that you need to be able to give people the ability to call you using click-to-call. You can see some examples from landing pages here. On the left, this is a Salesforce campaign that's asking someone to fill out a form to take a test drive for their new Wave Analytics program. But people don't necessarily want to fill out forms on their smartphone. So Salesforce, rightly so, smartly so, has a very prominent call us call to action directly above the form. So I would for content marketing, for lead gen forms on your mobile optimized pages, definitely include that call us call to action. You can see examples here, different ones. One's for Progressive for a call for a quote. Progressive is very big on having you fill out a form, entering your zip code. Most insurance companies do this where you can get a quick quote online, but some people who click on your ad are ready to talk to somebody right away. So make sure you give them that call us call to action, as you can see Progressive has in the top right. Here's an example from a car dealer. Same thing. Volumes to car dealers are actually skyrocketing. People are now converting on paid search and display ads by making phone calls to the dealership. So here's an example. This one I like because the Joe Johnson Chevrolet, they separate out you have one button for sales and one button for service. So that's one way they can help segregate some of the call volumes. One call triggers, goes right to a sales agent, while the other might go to their maintenance and their service people. So I thought that was clever and cool to have two of those call buttons specifically for different types of business within that company. So if you have multiple locations and people are going to be running searches to find the right location to call on your mobile landing pages, offer up a locator list. You can see different variations of that. On the left is Holiday Inn, then there's a car dealership for Ford in the middle, and then there's a branch. The Fifth Third is a bank, obviously, so there's a banking location. But if you have multiple locations, make it easy for people to find the right location to nearest them, and then make it easy for them to call you based on those locations. You can see examples here. Now, if you're going to list multiple locations on a single page, DialogTech can actually attribute calls from those. They can show different tracking numbers on each of those for each of those locations, and even attribute calls back to the exact keyword that drove that visitor. So if a visitor visited your site from paid search and ran a search for a dealership in their area and picked one and called, you can know that call came directly from which keywords triggered that visit and which ads triggered that visit that eventually led to that phone call. Mobile checkout. If you're running e-commerce on your mobile site, you should include a call to action or an option to call during the checkout process. We always hear, some mobile searches or mobile e-commerce has higher abandon rates, shopping cart abandon rates than desktop does. And part of the reason why is that people need to have that call option. So you want to be able to reduce checkouts. If someone has a question, give them that option to call. Make it easy for them to have a phone call and talk to somebody and answer the questions in order to proceed with that purchase. And one quick note here: if you have e-commerce on your mobile site, test out different. You can see on the left there's a really stripped down version of a checkout versus the one on the right, which has the site navs. It's got on the bottom some of the social media links. It's got extra calls and incentives and offers. If you have mobile pages where your mobile checkout pages, you need to do some testing and make sure that you're not confusing or overburdening people with all these extra offers. I think there's certainly a happy medium where you can push what you want to push, but still make it easy for somebody to complete a purchase on your site. So I touched on this earlier for call extensions, but obviously it's just as important to attribute calls from your website back to the source, back for paid search. So in this example, seeing the keywords, ads, and web pages that drove each call from whichever search engine you're advertising on. And DialogTech, part of our solution, makes it really easy for you to do that. Here's a quick example of how it works. Basically, you've got somebody who runs a search, clicks on your paid search ad to visit the site, scrolls around, and triggers a call. When that happens, you'll be able to attribute that call to the search engine, keyword search, ad, and landing page that drove the call. You'll know who that caller is, and you'll know where that caller went, and you'll know what happened on the call. You'll also be able to pass all that data down into whichever third-party tools, bid management, web analytics, AdWords, CRM, or marketing automation tools you're using to help track and improve your paid search campaign. And then once you have this, you're able to really optimize spend for what's driving calls and sales. You'll know which keywords are driving visits that drive calls. You'll know which ad text, which landing pages are performing best when it comes to driving calls and sales. And you can optimize for what's working and help cut out what isn't to really drive real results. Quick example of a customer here from a Dialog Tech customer called Hotels Core. They're a subsidiary of Westgate Resorts, who are one of the largest resort developers in the world, and they use Dialog Tech's keyword level call tracking to attribute thousands of monthly calls from paid search. They do a great job of generating calls from their paid search campaigns. And it was really important that they were able to understand exactly what drove that call, so they could not only prove the value of their campaigns, but optimize them to drive more. And with Dialog Tech, they were able to do that. You can see some of the numbers here. They're able to generate 83% more calls and 70% more bookings, which is, of course, is the end result of any marketing campaign, is to drive actual revenue and opportunities, not just leads. And they're able to cut down their cost of conversion by 10%, which is also a huge benefit. But you should, when you're doing analytics for your paid search campaigns, it's not just about tracking the marketing source. You should also track other things that are involved within the call in order to really drive real results. So one of those things I mentioned earlier would be website activity. Understanding which landing pages are driving the most visits, but then if someone doesn't call from that landing page, understand the path each caller took throughout your site before and after they called. So if you can see trends where someone is coming to a certain landing page, making a click to another page, and visiting a third page that actually drives a conversion, you'll know that that third page is doing a great job of driving the actual conversion. And you can help use that knowledge, that insight, to optimize performance of all your pages. You can also see which operating system and browser the person is visiting your site on before they call. And caller information, so the exact geographic location of each caller, the day and time that caller called, and their caller ID. All that information is being captured at the time of the call, captured in real time. You can also see as a marketer who took the call. You can start doing some interesting reports about where your paid search is driving calls, driving it to certain locations if you're doing a national paid search with local intent. So if you have multiple dealerships or stores, like for franchises, for example, you can prove how your marketing is driving calls to each of those locations. If you're driving calls to a call center, you can see which operator, which agent, sales agent took the call, and then start to understand which calls are better, which agents are doing a better job of converting your calls to revenue, and then maybe even you can start routing more calls to those agents to drive more revenue from your actual spend on paid search. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So A/B testing data, you should obviously use your call tracking, call attribution data in A/B tests. So I talked a second ago about how you know which pages are driving calls. If you want to do A/B testing, either with a tool like Optimizely or doing it on your own, you should be able to understand not just which pages are driving form fills and conversions, but which pages are driving phone calls, especially as we talked about in mobile, where because of smartphones, phone calls are so important to the entire mobile experience. So here's a quick example. You can see this is from a company that used Dialog Tech to prove which of their which version of their landing pages drove the most calls. It's a really simple change here. You can see just the button was changed, but one button actually drove 130% more phone calls than the other button. So these are the type of information as marketers we really need to understand in order to optimize performance. So Dialog Tech can track where the calls came from and the time and date of the calls, as I said. So you can use that information to do really smart, intelligent bid optimizations for your paid search campaigns. So if you know that certain areas of the country, locations in the country are driving are calling from your paid search ads, you may want to optimize your spend there in order to make sure that you're capturing all of that business. If you know that people are calling you more on their lunch breaks in certain time zones, or calling you after work, or on the weekends, that's great knowledge to know. Make sure your ads and your bids are adjusted so that you're showing up for those crucial times. And you can also now know that when people are calling you at certain times and days of the week, that you're ready, that your call center or your staff, your business, has agents standing by and are ready to take that call. You don't want to spend money to optimize a paid search campaign to drive calls to an empty phone. You want to make sure that you're spending money at the right times and in the right places, and reports from DialogTech can help you do that. So let's talk a little bit about the different levels of geo-targeting. So geo-targeting is a really interesting thing you can do for mobile devices. And here's the 10 levels of geo-targeting that ADWORDS provides, from the very top level, which is the country, the broadest geo-targeting, all the way down to even very specific targeting like an airport or a university. The screenshot here I'm showing is the radius tool, where you can actually set up a radius in ADWORDS where your ads will run, and then ADWORDS will list all the locations that are within that radius, which I think is really interesting. It depends, of course, on what kind of business you run. But if you want, for example, to drive business drive calls and have your ads show up to searches near one of your stores, this is a great tool to do that. Conversely, you may want to target competitor stores. So there are statistics that show that 82% of people who are shopping in a store use their smartphones to do research. So perhaps you want to be able to target some competitor locations that when they're running comparisons for prices or other items, you can actually have your ads show up that they'll see right away, and maybe give them an incentive to call you, see if they can say that you have that item in stock, call now for a discount. It's really interesting the different ways you can use geo-targeting to make sure your ads show up, and the kinds of language you can use and incentives you can use to drive a conversion. So I touched on this before, but I wanted to provide a few more examples of all the types of tools. These are the types of tools that DialogTech integrates with out of the box. So we plug in, we have built-in integrations for all of these tools, from CRM solutions to bid management solutions like Marid, Kenshu, Acquisio, DoubleClick, and Ignition One, and then of course the marketing automation tools, and I mentioned Optimizely as well before. But think about all the tools you use to track and optimize paid search, and think about these tools work great for online conversions, but they don't track and they don't use offline conversions like phone calls, and this is one way to plug that very important data from mobile directly into those tools, so you can start using that data to really understand what's happening and optimize campaigns for the keywords and the ads that are actually driving calls as well as clicks. So controlling the in-call experience, I mentioned this during the agenda that we'd be talking about, different technologies you can use to control the in-call experience. This is a new idea for some marketers who are used to possibly just generating leads on a landing page and not worrying about where those leads go. But a phone call is a real-time lead. And as marketers, you can actually control in real time where that lead goes to give it the best chance of converting from a lead to an opportunity appointment, or hopefully a revenue and a customer. So the first tool that DialogTech offers is an IVR. That stands for Interactive Voice Response. And that's a tool, it's an automated phone menu that you can send callers from your paid search campaigns, from call extensions, or from your landing page. You can send them directly to an IVR that can ask them questions that can help to identify their intent and filter out the non-sales calls, and then route the people accordingly based on their answers. And your questions can be whatever you want them to be. They could be as simple as press 1 to talk to sales, press 2 to talk to support, but it's a great way to do some triage up front to help your sales team not have to deal with non-sales calls. It's also a great way to filter out some of the spam calls that we've seen recently on the uptick. So IVR is one way to do that. It can also help you as a marketer, when you generate reports, understand how much from your paid search, for example, which keywords are driving sales calls versus other types of calls. You can generate a report to see where those calls are, how those calls are being segregated off from the IVR, and that can give you some deeper understanding into not just the call volumes, but the intent of the caller, the type of the call that you're generating from your different paid search campaigns. Quick example here, Sleep Train is a really big mattress retailer out on the West Coast. They use DIALOGTECH'S IVR to help do some filtering and some automated assistance for their phone calls to their business. Basically, they set it up where you can press 1 to talk to a sleep advisor in the store nearest you. So if you call and press 1, you get automatically routed to the closest Sleep Train store in your area. If you want to make an order over the phone, you can press 2 and actually complete your purchase over the phone, which some people do. And you can see some stats that show that this helps their team. They have only a 3-man inside sales team, but this IVR helps filter out all of the thousands of calls they're getting for the stores, and it enables a 3-man team to generate and keep up with call volumes for over the phone orders, which I think is really cool. The second technology besides IVR is call routing. This is extremely interesting. It's the idea that I talked about earlier, all the analytics and attribution information that are being pinned to every single phone call that you're generating. Now, you can set up rules in DialogTech to route callers differently based on these qualities, this data that you're automatically capturing. So for example, you can automatically route callers from your paid search or your landing pages differently based on where they are in the country. We actually have geolocation technology that uses cell tower triangulation. So if someone calls you from their smartphone, you can know exactly where they're located, and you can route those calls automatically based on their exact location. You can also route calls differently based on the keywords they search. Since you're capturing that information, perhaps you want to route calls differently if someone's searching for home insurance versus car insurance, for one example. Maybe you have dealerships, different car dealerships that deal with different make and models, or used cars versus new cars, whatever the case may be. You can actually set up rules where these calls are automatically routed from your campaigns differently based on the keywords they search. Time of day is a big one too, making sure that the calls are sent differently based on when they're calling. If you've got different agents in different locations throughout the country, you want to route that way. And I touched on the last one a little while ago, which was basically using sales agent performance. So if you have some sales agents that you know are better performers, you can set it up that they get a higher percentage of your phone calls. So that way it gives you a better chance of actually generating real revenue from those calls. You can set it up so that you get credit. You can help generate revenue, which is great. When the calls come in, we captured all that information, and we can present some of that information at the time of the call to the sales agent. So here's an example of DialogTech's agent panel on the right. You can see how it's capturing where the caller came from, the caller's location, the number they called, as well as the marketing source. You can see it actually captures the keyword search this person ran. And if this person has a link in your CRM system, you can actually have a link in the screen pop that your sales agent can click on to be automatically taken to that person's records. So they can see the history, understand who they're talking to. All of this happens before they even pick up the phone and say hello. So it's a great way to arm your sales staff with the information they need in order to help have a better conversation, a higher quality conversation that will hopefully convert that lead, that caller, to revenue. Here's an example of call routing, which I thought was really cool. A company called VERSATUBE, which is doing paid search advertising, as you can see on the right. When they generate calls, they've got some sales agents set up on the East Coast, as well as some sales agents set up on the West Coast, and they route calls differently based on time of day. So a call in the morning will be sent to every sales agent's cell phone at once. So these sales agents can be working out in the field. They could be working remotely from home. The calls are all sending, each call rings every single sales agent's phone at once, and the first one who answers that call gets the lead. Same thing on the West Coast. If the call comes in later on in the day, that call is routed automatically to agents on the West Coast. So it's a way for them to extend their business hours from paid search and make sure that people who are calling are being addressed and being helped. And if no one answers, the call goes to a receptionist in the main office. And this enabled them to increase revenue from calls by 89%. It's a great statistic. It shows the power of what intelligent call routing can do for a business. Now, the last bit of technology I'm going to cover is analyzing call quality and actually what happens on a conversation. So as marketers are spending money on paid search and other ways to generate calls, I know there are real conversations happening from these calls, and there's stuff that we can actually learn from those conversations. So how can you analyze what happens on conversations to help improve the call quality of the calls? So one way is through call duration reports. You can run reports that show from this paid search campaign or this keyword the average length of the calls that you're generating. So the longer the conversation, it's probably indicative of a higher quality sales call. If you're an agency, this is a great tool to have because it's a way for you to get some visibility into what's happening on the calls you're generating. But it's also great as well if you're a marketer who doesn't want to listen to actual call recordings and just wants to get a general sense of the quality of the calls from each of their marketing sources. But DialogTech also records calls. So if you're interested in listening to call recordings, we capture and store forever all the call recordings from your business if you want to. And you can go in and listen to actual conversations if you wish to understand what's happening on those calls. I talked about CRM, integrating CRM before, but if you have a CRM system, you can integrate the call data so that you can track calls from paid search or any marketing source through the sales funnel to actual opportunities, pipelines, and revenue. So then you can do real meaningful reports about which sources are driving revenue. And those are extremely powerful reports to present to your CMO or your CEO. It's not just about generating leads, it's about generating leads that become revenue. And integrating call data in your CRM system is one way you can do that. The last technology I'm going to mention is something called Conversation Insights, which is a really interesting and cool new technology that DialogTech has. So think about during the conversations from your marketing, what are there words, are there phrases that would indicate a quality call? So for example, in this, someone's calling about car insurance. They actually ask about pricing. The sales agent offers a discount, and then the caller says they'd like to buy it now. If you were able to run searches through these conversations, all the conversations from your campaigns, to see what's happening, are there words or phrases that you'd like to see? Are these words being used? Who's using them? How frequently are they being used in your conversations? Conversation Insight is a tool from DialogTech that can do that. And here's an example of the screenshot where someone was searching for the word appointment. And you can see all in the background all the calls, the actual calls where the word appointment was being used. And you can drill into each of those calls and see who said the word appointment, where in the call that word was used and how it was used. You can even listen to the recording of where that phrase, that word was spoken and took place to get real insight. So, for example, if you want to learn more about, the keywords you're using, the keywords that are generating calls for your business, are those keywords being used in the call? Are other keywords being used in the call by the customer that you may actually want to think about bidding on? You can get some information like that by running searches through the DialogTech's Conversation Insights tool. It's kind of like Google for conversations. You can run searches through all your conversations for the keywords that you think are meaningful and see exactly where those words took place within each of the conversations. So I'm going to end by giving you one last DialogTech customer example. This is the one from an agency called Square One, who was hired by one of the biggest HVAC manufacturers in the world to do national campaigns to drive local leads to some of their local U.S. dealers, 50 local U.S. dealers. And they used paid search to do that. So one way they tracked performance by linking DialogTech's call attribution technology straight into Google Analytics. You can see an example here of a screenshot where that call data shows up alongside your web data. There's tons of reports where this happens. And you can get really meaningful, insightful data that shows a complete, accurate view of ROI when you're measuring both web activity and calls together. They then integrated DialogTech's with Kenshu. That's a bid management platform. So they used Kenshu to automatically allocate budgets for the keywords that were driving conversions, and by integrating DialogTech's call attribution technology into Kenshu, they can then use calls, so not just web conversions, but call conversions. So they have a complete idea of what's driving calls and online conversions, and they can bid on the keywords automatically in Kenshu that were driving those. They were bidding up those keywords while cutting off the spend on what wasn't driving actual online and offline conversions. And then when people were calling in, they're using a simple IVR to qualify the caller, asking them to press 1 to talk to sales. And they were routing those calls geographically to the closest dealer. All of this was happening automatically. And they were generating reports in DialogTech that shows call volumes to each of the dealers. So it was a way for a national campaign to prove its value to each of the local dealers, to show, yes, my campaign drove 50, 100, 200 calls to your franchise in the past month. And at the end of the day, they were able to, using these technologies, they're able to drive 75% more phone leads to these local dealers while cutting cost and spend in paid search to 65%. So I know that was a ton of information. Thank you so much for joining me. I do have a little bit of time for Q&A. If you're interested in getting a demo or seeing more about DialogTech, please visit our website or give us a call. We'd be happy to give you a demo of our mobile marketing solution or other solutions. So I'm going to take a quick drink of water, and then I'm going to get to some of your questions. Okay. Can you tell us how paid search is different from regular search? So are we talking about how paid search in terms of, are we talking about organic search versus paid search? Okay, so I think this is the one that I will happy to address offline, because there are a lot of differences between paid search and organic search, and it's a good question, but it's one where there are some links that I think would better explain that one, because I know for most people they understand the differences. So let me handle that one offline for you. Does DialogTech have the feature called Signal Transcription Service? This feature is able to identify phrases. Okay, so thank you for that question. I think I answered it when I went over the conversation insight piece. So yes, we do have a feature to identify which words are spoken within a conversation. Any tips for driving calls with RLSA? Okay, good question. RLSA, if you're not familiar with it, is remarketing lists for search ads, and it's the idea that you can have your ads or bid differently or show different ads to people who have actually performed some kind of activity on your website or in your mobile app. So if someone went ahead and made a purchase on your site or visited your site or visited a certain page, you can actually tweak your bids differently to show when someone runs a search, when one of those people runs a search, you can bid differently for those people versus other people. So tips for driving calls from RLSA. Well, I think it depends on the nature of your business. I would say that, I showed that example before of a lead form. So if somebody, if you're a business where you use content marketing to generate leads at the top of the funnel and then nurture those leads before they engage the sales rep, if someone's already filled out a lead form with you for a piece of content, you may want to bid more on those people when they search, and so that the call button shows up on your ad. And people hopefully would then, if they've already downloaded your content, perhaps they're further along in your sales cycle. If they run a search again, you want to capture them and incentivize them to call you. So a call button would be great. It'd be great to bid more on those people. I would also offer incentives. Another way would be to offer special incentives to these people who've already visited your site, and use language that acknowledges that these are people who are already familiar with you. Perhaps they're already a customer. Come back and save 10%. Give us a call now. Those are the types of language and things you can do to drive calls with RLSA. Let me see. Does DialogTech integrate with other CRM besides Salesforce? Yes, we do. So I did show Salesforce, and I talked about Salesforce. But if you're using Sugar CRM or Microsoft Dynamics, we also integrate with those technologies. You can also pass call attribution and analytics data directly into those if you're not using Salesforce, but rather using a different CRM. Does Dialogtech work for other sources? Yes, we do work for other sources. This webinar was about paid search, but we also work for SEO. We work for social media ads. We work for offline ads like television or direct mail. Really any marketing source that you want to put a phone number on or use to drive people to your website, we can track calls from that source. So thank you for that. I'm actually over my limit. I didn't even notice the time. So one more question, and that'll do it. So why doesn't my call extension ads show up in Google? So why don't my call extension ads show up in Google? That is a good question. I think I had some examples of ads there where there were some call extensions but not others. Your call extensions, when you enable them, don't automatically show up in Google. And there are a bunch of different reasons why they wouldn't show up in a search. Part of it's your ad rank. So your ad rank is a combination of your bid, the quality of your ad and landing page, and really the expectant impact of extensions and other ad formats. So, if your ad rank is low, Google might not show the call, but honestly, it could be a question of your bidding. How much are you spending for that particular keyword and that particular search? So Google might ding you if you're not using the maximum cost per click there. So there are a bunch of different reasons. Sometimes if you're enabling or showing so many different ad extensions, they might just take the call extension and off. So it's a good question. I would definitely go to AdWords and do a quick search. Google has information on this if you wanted to learn more about the reasons why your call extension isn't showing up for your search. So I know I went over. Thank you so much for everyone for sticking with me and participating in this webinar. I hope it was of value to you. We will email you or a link to it as well if you missed some of it or want to watch it again or share it with a colleague or a friend. And if you have any questions I didn't get to, please just hit respond, and I'll respond to that email, and I will be happy to have any kind of dialogue with you to go over more tips and techniques that are more applicable to your specific business. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great day.